if you're not happy with your life, if you're miserable, you sit on the edge of your bed and you think, is there anything I can change in what I'm doing that is going to make this less awful than it has to be? Less awful than it might be? And you have to ask that, with intent. And generally speaking, you'll get an answer almost immediately. You inspire most through example. It's much more powerful than words. Words are very powerful if they're also accompanied by example. But the best thing you can do is start putting things together around you. There's plenty of things to put together. I think that room for those incremental improvements exists within everyone's grasp. And I think that it's a humble thing to do, to ask how you could improve incrementally without interfering with anyone else, like it's your problem, not theirs. But I think that the consequences of maintained incremental improvement are anything but incremental. You get compound interest on incremental improvement.
If you have a high goal and you see any movement towards it, there's a really powerful potential kick there. So you don't want to dispense with that. But then if you set up an ideal, it can judge you very harshly. So then you have to rearrange your reward philosophy, and instead of punishing yourself as a consequence of perceived distance, you reward yourself for incremental movement forward. And that's not just theoretical. Generally, people are pleased to tell me, although sometimes it takes them a while to formulate exactly the description, but they've said, I stopped comparing myself to other people. So I stopped comparing what I didn't have to what other people had. I left that off the table. And then I started to reward myself for improving over what I was yesterday. And that's profound change, because it means that you actually get your reward structure transformed. And that's a big deal, because that's your source of positive emotion and enthusiasm, encouragement, all of that. So now you can start to encourage yourself for genuine improvement. And it's also pragmatically extremely intelligent, because incremental improvement repeated is virtually unstoppable. You come and you say to me, things aren't the way I want them to be. And then I say, well, how would you like them to be? And how are they not that? So we lay out the problem, the territory. And then the next thing we do is lay out a trajectory, which is, okay, well, here's something. You're lonesome. You don't have a partner. Okay, so what are incremental movements can you make towards that goal that you would do that would be helpful? What you do is you reduce the magnitude of the move forward until you hit the point where you actually will do it. And that's like the secret to good negotiation as well. If you're negotiating with your wife, maybe you want one of her behaviors to change. And then obviously she has to be on board with that, and hypothetically that's going to be a reciprocal process. But what you want to do is find a small improvement that is measurable, that's implementable, that will be implemented, that you can then reward. And that's how you can have your ideal. You can have whatever ideal you want as long as you're willing to reduce your movement forward to achievable increments. But that's okay, because they compound. So, and I really learned this as a therapist. It was one of the things that was so fun about being a therapist, is you can take someone through this process and start them on just the tiniest goal. And it just seems trivial, but they'll do it, and then they start moving faster and faster after that point, once the direction has been established. And people make incredible improvement over not unreasonable spans of time. A few months, maybe a few years, but which is not nothing, but it's not decades. I saw that time and time again. So aim high, but reward yourself for small incremental improvements, especially ones that repeat every day. The general consequence of that is that every time they manage an accomplishment, they get a little stronger in character,
They get a little bit more confident in their ability. They get a little bit less racked with self-disgust. They get a little bit more hopeful about the future. And they get more confident that they can make another change. And if you're patient, and you have to be patient with yourself that way, it's like you reward those incremental improvements and you don't get all cynical about them. And you think, okay, just imagine what would happen if you kept doing that every week for 10 years. And the answer to that is, things would be so much better for you that you can't even imagine it with that much improvement. Or maybe even with half that much improvement. And so that's a very good way of progressing. So